I lived with my best friend for 10 years. Today, I found out he was my handler and my entire life is a controlled experiment. I just found the graves of the 5 versions of me that came before. My father was a saint. That's what everyone in our small town in Vermont said at his funeral. They talked about his charity work, his 30 years as a high school principal, and how he was the moral compass of the community. I believed them. I really did. Until 3 days ago, when I found the brass key taped to the underside of his old mahogany desk. It didn't fit any lock in the house. At least, not any lock that was visible. My name is Elias, and what I'm about to tell you is going to sound like a movie, but I swear on everything I own, this is my current reality. After the funeral, the house felt cold, heavy with a silence that seemed to hum in my ears. I was cleaning out his study, a room filled with the scent of old paper and expensive tobacco. When I flipped the desk to move it, I saw it. A small, tarnished brass key with a number 402 etched into it. No context, no note. Just the key. At first, I thought it was a safe deposit box. But my father didn't have any accounts at the local bank other than his checking. I spent hours searching for where it belonged. Then, I remembered the false wall in the pantry that he always joked about fixing but never let me touch. I went there with a hammer and a flashlight. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack. Behind the drywall, there wasn't a room, just a small, heavy steel door built into the foundation of the house. The key fit perfectly. The sound of the lock turning was the loudest thing I've ever heard. As the door creaked open, a smell hit me, not rot, but something sterile, like a hospital. I stepped inside and flicked my flashlight. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10. In the center was a single chair, a high-end recording setup, and walls covered in hundreds of photographs. But they weren't photos of us. They were photos of people from town, people who had gone missing over the last 20 years. My breath hitched. In the middle of the wall was a photo of a girl I went to high school with, Sarah Jenkins. She disappeared in 2012. Under her photo, in my father's neat, academic handwriting, it said, "Experiment 14, failed to adapt." My legs gave out. I wasn't just standing in a hidden room. I was standing in the archive of a monster. I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. I live alone. Or I thought I did. Someone is in the house, and they just locked the pantry door from the other side. I'm trapped in here with the evidence of my father's crimes, and the silence is starting to scream. If you're reading this, I've uploaded this to a cloud drive. I don't know who my father really was, but he wasn't a saint. He was a curator of nightmares. And I think the experiment isn't over yet. I can hear someone breathing through the vent in the ceiling. They're whispering my name. The sound of that pantry door clicking shut was like a guillotine dropping on my life. I stood there, paralyzed, the beam of my flashlight trembling against the wall of missing faces. "Elias, stop looking," the voice whispered through the vent. It wasn't my father's voice, but it had that same calm, academic tone that made my skin crawl. It was cold, rhythmic, and terrifyingly familiar. I rushed to the steel door and pulled the handle. Locked from the outside. My father's sanctuary had become my tomb in a matter of seconds. I turned back to the photographs. Sarah Jenkins, the girl from high school, wasn't the only one. There was Mr. Henderson, the librarian who moved to Florida 5 years ago, and Mrs. Gable, the lady who lived 3 houses down. All of them were labeled as experiments. My eyes darted to the recording setup on the desk. There was a single cassette tape sitting in the player. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the play button. If I pressed it, there was no going back. But I had to know. I hit play. At first, there was only static, a white noise that sounded like rushing water. Then a voice. It was my father. Day 4281, he said, his tone as casual as if he were reading a grocery list. The subject's resistance to the psychological anchor is fascinating. Physical pain is a primitive tool. True control lies in the erasure of identity. Elias is sleeping in the room above me, unaware that his very existence is the control variable for this entire project. My blood turned to ice. I wasn't just his son. I was part of the study. The whispering from the vent grew, louder, more frantic. He's coming, Elias. The one who cleans up the failures. You weren't supposed to find the key until the transition was complete. I started screaming, banging my fists against the steel door until my knuckles bled, but the walls were soundproof with thick, professional-grade foam. I looked around the room frantically for a weapon, anything to defend myself. That's when I noticed a small floor safe tucked under the desk, partially hidden by a rug. It didn't need a key, it needed a fingerprint. On a whim, I pressed my thumb against the cold glass scanner. It turned green. The heavy lid hissed open. Inside wasn't money or jewelry. It was a stack of birth certificates, dozens of them. I grabbed the one on top. It had my name on it, Elias Thorne, but the date of birth was wrong. It said I was born in 1998. The one underneath it also had my name, but the date was 2002. There were 5 different birth certificates for Elias Thorne, each with a different birth year, spanning 3 decades. I realized with a sickening jolt that I wasn't the first Elias. I was just the latest version. Suddenly, the sterile smell in the room changed. It became pungent, chemical, the smell of chloroform. I looked up and saw a faint mist beginning to hiss through the ceiling vents. They weren't just watching me, they were resetting me. I grabbed the recording equipment and the folder of photos, shoving them into my backpack, gasping for clean air near the floor. I had to get out. I looked at the photos one last time and noticed something I had missed. In the background of every single kidnapping photo, there was a dark gray van with a specific bumper sticker, a golden owl. As my vision began to blur and the room started to spin, I heard the steel door finally groan. It wasn't opening to let me out. Someone was coming in, wearing a gas mask, holding a syringe that caught the dim light of my dying flashlight. "Don't fight it, Elias," the figure said. "Number 6 is always the most difficult to stabilize." I swung my backpack with the last of my strength, feeling it connect with something solid before the world turned black. My head felt like it had been cracked open with a sledgehammer. When my eyes finally flickered open, I wasn't in the secret room anymore. I was lying on the cold, cracked leather seat of a moving vehicle. The hum of tires on wet asphalt vibrated through my skull. I tried to move my hands, but they were zip-tied behind my back, the plastic biting deep into my wrists. I kept my breathing shallow, pretending to still be unconscious. "He hit me pretty hard, boss," a voice growled from the driver's seat. It was a gravelly, low-frequency voice I didn't recognize. "He's stronger than the last one," a second voice replied, this one smoother, chillingly calm. "Strength is irrelevant. Memory is everything. If the trauma hasn't triggered the reset, we proceed to the facility. The director wants to see why version 6 is reacting so aggressively to the truth." I felt a surge of pure, icy adrenaline. Version 6. The birth certificates weren't a lie. I was a replacement, a biological carbon copy of a son my father had lost, or perhaps, a son he had created. I felt the van take a sharp turn, and for a split second, I managed to squint. On the window glass, reflected by a passing streetlight, I saw it, the golden owl sticker, the symbol of the monster. I knew I had seconds before they checked on me. I felt around with my bound hands. My backpack was gone, but they had missed something. In my back pocket, I still had the brass key I found in my father's desk. It was jagged and sharp. I began to saw at the zip ties, ignoring the skin I was tearing away. The pain was the only thing keeping me from drifting back into the haze of the gas. Saw. Pull. Saw. Pull. Just as the van slowed down, I felt the plastic snap. My hands were free, but I kept them tucked behind me. The van stopped. The back doors creaked open, revealing a dark, forest-lined road in the middle of nowhere. The man with the gas mask reached in to grab my legs. I didn't wait. I launched myself forward, kicking both feet into his chest with every ounce of survival instinct I had left. He flew backward, hitting the gravel hard. I scrambled out of the van, my legs feeling like jelly, and bolted into the thick tree-line. "He's running!" the smooth-voiced man shouted, but he didn't sound panicked. He sounded disappointed. I ran until my lungs burned like they were filled with acid. I didn't look back. I crashed through briars and over fallen logs until I reached a narrow creek. I dove into the freezing water, pressing my body against the muddy bank, hoping the darkness would swallow me. I watched from the shadows as two sets of flashlights swept the woods. "It doesn't matter," I heard the calm voice say, surprisingly close now. "He has the tracker in his dental implant. Let him run for a few miles. It makes the final harvest more authentic." They laughed, a sound so hollow it made the woods feel dead. They walked back to the van and drove off. I lay there in the mud, shivering, my fingers touching my back molars. A tracker. I wasn't escaping. I was being hunted for sport. I realized then that my father's experiment wasn't just happening in our basement. The entire town, my entire life, was a controlled environment. I needed to get the tracker out, and I needed to find someone who wasn't part of the play. I reached into my front pocket and felt a small, crumpled piece of paper I must have shoved there during the struggle in the basement. I pulled it out. It was a Polaroid photo from my father's wall. It wasn't of a victim. It was a photo of my mother, who supposedly died when I was a baby. She was standing in front of a building that looked exactly like the one we were just driving toward. And on her lab coat, there was a badge. Project Director, Sarah Thorne. My mother wasn't a victim. She was the architect. The freezing water of the creek felt like needles against my skin, but the cold was the only thing keeping me conscious. I stayed submerged until the sound of the van faded into a distant hum. My mother. The woman I had spent 20 years mourning, the woman whose grave I visited every Mother's Day, was the director of this nightmare. My entire grief had been a programmed response. I crawled out of the mud, my body shaking uncontrollably, but my mind was sharpening. I had to get that tracker out. Every second I waited, they were pinpointing my coordinates on a digital map. I found a jagged piece of flint near the water's edge. It wasn't sterile, it wasn't safe, but it was all I had. I stumbled toward an abandoned hunter's cabin I spotted a few hundred yards away. Inside, it smelled of dry rot and old pine. I found a rusted mirror leaning against a wall and a half-empty bottle of cheap bourbon on a shelf. I didn't drink it. I poured it over the flint and then over my own jaw. The sting was blinding. I looked at my reflection. I looked like a ghost, a version 6 ghost. I opened my mouth wide, probing my back molars with my trembling fingers. I felt it. A small, hard protrusion on the side of my wisdom tooth that didn't belong there. It wasn't a filling. It was an intrusion. I took a deep breath, bit down on a piece of leather strap I found on the floor, and used the sharp edge of the stone to pry. The pain was an explosion of white light behind my eyes. I felt the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth, the sound of grinding stone against enamel echoing in my skull. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With a final, agonizing wrench, a small silver shard, no bigger than a grain of rice, clattered into the sink. It flickered with a faint, rhythmic blue light. Blink. 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 I didn't wait to catch my breath. I grabbed a heavy glass jar, dropped the tracker inside, and filled it with the remaining bourbon, hoping the liquid or the glass might muffle the signal. I looked at the Polaroid of my mother again. If she was the director, then who was buried in that grave in the town cemetery? I realized I had to go back. Not to my house, but to the cemetery. I needed to know if there was even a body in that casket, or if her death was just the start of her promotion. As I stepped out of the cabin, the forest felt different. The birds weren't chirping. The wind had died down. It was too quiet. I started walking toward the main road, keeping to the shadows of the trees. About a mile down, I saw a familiar car parked on the shoulder. It was my best friend Mark's Jeep. He was standing outside, looking at his phone, looking worried. My first instinct was to run to him, to scream for help. But then I stopped. "Mark is a variable." My father's voice echoed in my head from the tape. How did Mark know I was here? How did he find me in the middle of a forest at 3 a.m.? I watched him from behind a thick oak tree. He wasn't calling the police. He was talking into a professional-grade radio. "Target signal is stationary at the cabin," Mark said, his voice devoid of any of the warmth I had known for 10 years. "I'll intercept and prepare him for the reset. Tell the director that version 6 is showing unexpected levels of pain tolerance." My heart didn't just break, it shattered. My best friend. My brother. He was a handler. I looked down at the flint in my hand, then back at the man I thought I knew. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a glitch in their system, and it was time to start breaking things. I didn't run away this time. I started circling behind him, moving as silent as the shadows. If they wanted an experiment, I was going to give them one they couldn't control. I watched Mark, or the person I thought was Mark, standing by his Jeep, illuminated by the dim interior light. For 10 years, this man had been my best friend. He was there when I went through my first breakup. He was at my father's funeral crying harder than I was. Now, seeing him hold that tactical radio with such cold precision made me realize that my entire life was a scripted television show, and I was the only one who didn't know my lines. I felt a cold, hard rage replace the fear. I didn't just want to survive anymore. I wanted to dismantle their world. I crept through the underbrush, circling wide until I was directly behind him. I still had the jar with the blinking tracker. I placed it carefully on a flat rock about 50 yards away from him. Then I picked up a heavy branch. I threw it toward the jar. Crack. Mark spun around instantly, his hand moving to his waistband. He was carrying a suppressed Glock. A friend doesn't carry a suppressed weapon to find a missing buddy. "Elias?" he called out, his voice suddenly shifting back to that warm, concerned tone. "Buddy, I know you're out here. I found your signal. Just come out, you're hurt and confused. We can fix this." The manipulation was so perfect it almost made me sick. He started walking toward the jar, his gun lowered but ready. As he got closer to the rock, his focus narrowed. I was already moving, silent as a ghost, closing the gap behind him. He reached the jar, looked down, and saw the tracker submerged in bourbon. His shoulders slumped for a microsecond. Disappointment. That was my window. I didn't use the branch. I used the weight of my entire body. I tackled him from behind, my forearm slamming into his throat to cut off his scream. We hit the gravel hard. He was well trained, but I had the advantage of pure, unadulterated fury. We wrestled for the gun, the metal cold between our straining hands. "Who am I, Mark?" I hissed into his ear, my voice sounding like someone I didn't recognize. "Who was the first Elias?" He gasped for air, a twisted grin spreading across his face despite the chokehold. "You're just a ghost," he wheezed. I managed to wrench the gun from his grip and press the barrel against his temple. The woods went silent. Answer me, or version 7 starts tomorrow. I threatened. His eyes widened. He didn't expect me to know about the versions. You think killing me stops it? Mark laughed, a dry, rattling sound. I'm just a handler, Elias. Look at the trees. Look at the birds that don't fly at night. I looked up, and my heart stopped. High in the canopy, tucked between branches, were small red lights. Hundreds of them. The entire forest was a studio. Every inch of my escape had been filmed and analyzed. The director is impressed. Mark whispered, "You're the first one to remove the tracker without passing out. You're becoming something else." Suddenly, his radio chirped. Condition read, "Subject has obtained a weapon. Authorize immediate sedation." Mark looked at me with a flash of genuine pity. Run, Elias. Not to the road. To the cemetery. The truth isn't in the grave, it's under it. Before I could pull him up, a sharp whip sounded from the tree-line. Mark's eyes went dull as a tranquilizer dart buried itself in his neck. He slumped over, unconscious. They didn't care about their own people. I grabbed his radio, the gun, and his car keys. I didn't have much time. The red lights in the trees were starting to move. They weren't just cameras, they were drones. I scrambled into the Jeep, slammed it into gear, and floored it. As I sped away, I looked in the rearview mirror. A fleet of dark gray vans was emerging from the shadows of the trees like a pack of wolves. I wasn't just version 6 anymore. I was a defect. And in this world, defects are erased. I had one destination, my mother's grave. It was time to see what was really buried in the heart of this town. The tires of Mark's Jeep screamed as I tore through the gates of the Oakwood Cemetery. The moonlight cast long, skeletal shadows across the rows of headstones, and for the first time in my life, the dead felt like the only ones I could trust. Behind me, the red lights of the drones were closing in, a swarm of mechanical hornets. I slammed on the brakes near the Thorne family plot. My mother's headstone was simple, elegant. Sarah Thorne, 1975 to 2004. A mother's love never dies. I grabbed a shovel from the caretaker's shed nearby, my hands raw and bleeding. The truth is under the grave, Mark had said. I started digging. Every shuffle of dirt felt like I was tearing away a layer of my own brain. I didn't care about the sirens in the distance, or the red dots of laser sights dancing on the grass around me. I was a man possessed. 3 feet down, the shovel hit something hard. Not wood. Metal. I cleared the dirt with my bare hands, revealing a heavy, industrial-grade steel hatch with a keypad. It wasn't a coffin. It was an entrance. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the sky, amplified by the drones. "Elias, step away from the hatch. This is for your own stability. You are experiencing a Level 4 identity crisis. We can help you." I looked up, shouting at the red lights. "My name isn't Elias. I'm version 6. Is that what you want to hear?" I looked at the keypad. I needed a code. I thought of the birth certificates, the dates. 1998, 2002, 2005. I tried the date of my own birth from my fake ID, 1012. Access denied. I tried the date on the headstone, 2004. Access denied. Then, I remembered the brass key from the basement. The number etched on it, 402. I punched in 0-4-0-2. Click. The pneumatic seal hissed, releasing a cloud of cold, white vapor. The hatch swung open, revealing a ladder leading down into a brightly lit, sterile hallway that smelled of ozone and expensive floor wax. I jumped in just as a tranquilizer dart hissed past my ear, slamming the hatch shut from the inside and bolting it. I was in. I walked down the corridor, the silence down here more terrifying than the chaos above. The walls were lined with glass tanks. I stopped at the first one and felt my stomach drop into an abyss. Inside the glass, suspended in a pale blue liquid, was a boy. He looked exactly like me when I was 5 years old. I moved to the next tank. A 10-year-old me. The next, a 15-year-old me. They weren't just versions, they were backups. At the end of the hall, there was a massive observation window looking into a room that looked like a high-tech nursery. A woman was standing there, her back to me. She was humming a lullaby I remembered from my earliest childhood. She turned around slowly. It was her. My mother. She looked exactly as she did in the photos, not a day older. "Hello, Six," she said, her voice devoid of any maternal warmth. "I was wondering when you'd find your way back to the womb. You've always been the most curious of the batch." I raised Mark's gun, my hand shaking. "Where is the real Elias? The human one?" She smiled, a thin, clinical expression. "There never was a human Elias, honey. My husband and I couldn't have children. So we decided to invent one. You're not a person, you're the world's most successful piece of organic software. And unfortunately," she stepped aside, revealing a computer screen showing my vitals rapidly dropping, "you've just reached your expiration date." As she said it, my heart skipped a beat, then another. A sharp, stinging pain flared in my chest. She hadn't sent guards to kill me. She had just turned me off. I collapsed against the glass tank of my younger self, my vision fading. "Don't worry," she whispered, leaning over me. "Version 7 is already in the incubator. He'll have your memories, but none of your stubbornness." My heart stopped. Darkness swallowed me. But then, a flash of red light appeared in my internal HUD, something I didn't even know I had. A line of code scrolled across my vision. Reboot initiated. Core protocol override. System independence. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't dead. I was something the director hadn't accounted for. I was a machine that had learned how to hate. The director's smile froze. She was looking at her tablet, her fingers frantically tapping at the screen. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice finally losing its calm, clinical edge. "The cardiac override was hard-coded into your nervous system. You should be brain dead." I stood up, my joints popping with a sound like snapping dry wood. I didn't feel the pain anymore. Instead, I felt a strange, electric clarity. My vision was overlaid with data, thermal signatures, structural weaknesses in the room, and a countdown timer I didn't understand. I looked at my hands. They weren't metal, they were flesh and blood, but something was pulsing beneath the skin, a faint, golden glow of nanites working overtime to repair my heart. "I'm not a version, Sarah," I said, my voice sounding deeper, distorted by the room's acoustics. "I'm a mistake you can't delete." I lunged at the observation window. The reinforced glass didn't shatter. It spiderwebbed under the force of a strength I never knew I possessed. She backed away, reaching for a red button on the wall. "Security! Level 6 is conscious. Initiate total purge of Sector 4. The lights in the hallway turned a violent crimson. Heavy blast doors began to slide shut. I had seconds. I didn't run for the exit. I ran for the main server hub at the back of the nursery. If I was software, I needed to see my source code. I smashed through a wooden door and found myself in a room filled with humming towers of black glass. I grabbed a stray fiber optic cable and, guided by an instinct I couldn't explain, I pressed it against the open wound on my wrist where I had cut out the tracker. The connection was instantaneous. It wasn't like reading a book. It was like a tidal wave of 1,000 lives crashing into my skull. I saw everything. Project Second Chance. My father wasn't a principal. He was a disgraced neural engineer. My mother wasn't a scientist. She was a grieving billionaire who had lost her real son, the original Elias, in a car accident 30 years ago. They hadn't just made me. They had been trying to perfect the soul transfer for decades. Every previous version, 1 through 5, had gone insane or died during the upload. I was the first stable one. Ground. Suddenly, a new file flashed in my mind, labeled the failsafe. It wasn't in my heart. It was in my memories. If version 6 ever became self-aware, the system would trigger a remote detonation of the town's chemical plant to clean the slate. They were going to kill everyone just to cover up my existence. I pulled the cable out, my brain reeling. I looked at the director through the security camera I had just hacked into with my mind. "You're going to kill them all?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the facility's speakers. "Just to hide me." She looked directly into the camera lens, her eyes cold as ice. "Not to hide you, Elias. To start over. Version 7 is already being born, and he won't have your glitches. Goodbye, my beautiful boy." The floor beneath me began to vibrate. The self-destruct sequence for the lab had started. I had 10 minutes to find the 7 incubator, stop the chemical plant explosion, and get out of this grave. I looked at the gun in my hand and realized I didn't need bullets anymore. I was the weapon. The countdown was screaming in my head, a digital pulse synchronized with my heartbeat. 7 minutes. The laboratory walls groaned under the pressure of the self-destruct sequence, and the smell of ozone was being replaced by the acrid scent of gas. I sprinted toward the incubator wing, my feet barely touching the sterile tiles. My vision was a storm of data. I could see the electrical wiring through the walls, the heat signatures of guards moving toward me, and the red line of the failsafe protocol winding its way toward the town's chemical plant. I wasn't just running. I was hacking the facility with every breath. I bypassed the final security gate by surging my internal power into the lock, melting the circuitry instantly. The doors slid open to reveal a chamber bathed in a haunting, bioluminescent green light. In the center sat a single, massive glass tube. Inside, a body was floating. It wasn't a child this time. It was a man. He looked exactly like me, version 7. But there was something wrong. His eyes were wide open, staring directly at me through the fluid. He wasn't waiting to be born. He was waiting for me. "He's been uploaded with your combat data in real time, Elias." My mother's voice boomed over the intercom, sounding triumphant. "Everything you just learned, he already knows. Every move you make, he's already countered." With a deafening crack, the glass of the incubator shattered. The green fluid flooded the floor, and version 7 stepped out, coughing up the synthetic lung liquid. He looked at me, and for a second, it was like looking into a mirror that only reflected hate. He didn't say a word. He lunged. The speed was inhuman. We collided with the force of 2 freight trains, crashing through reinforced desks and computer monitors. He was faster, sharper, and he didn't have the glitch of human emotion slowing him down. As he pinned me against a server rack, his hands tightening around my throat, I felt my systems flickering. Critical damage. System failure imminent. "You are a prototype," 7 whispered, his voice a perfect, chilling echo of my own. "I am the product." I could feel the life, or the energy, draining out of me. But then, I saw the reflection of the Golden Owl logo on the screen behind him. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a frequency. I realized then that my glitch wasn't a weakness. My emotions, my memories of the real Mark, the fake father, the grief, they were generating a chaotic neural pattern that 7 couldn't predict because he didn't have a soul to match it. I didn't fight back with strength. I focused on the connection I still had with the main server. I didn't try to shut down the facility. I did something worse. I uploaded every single, failed, memory from versions 1 through 5 directly into Seven's mind. Thousands of hours of screaming, dying, and psychological torture flooded his pristine brain. Seven shrieked, his grip loosening as his eyes began to bleed digital static. His perfect logic was being torn apart by the ghosts of our brothers. I pushed him off and grabbed the master override key from the central console. 4 minutes left. The town was still wired to explode. I looked at Seven, who was convulsing on the floor, his mind shattered by the collective trauma of the Elias lineage. I had to choose: kill the woman who claimed to be my mother, or save the town that had been my prison. I turned toward the elevator that led to the director's office. "I'm coming for you, Sarah," I whispered into the camera. I didn't just want to stop the explosion. I wanted to burn the Golden Owl to the ground. The elevator ascended through the bedrock with a violent jolt. 2 minutes remained. My internal HUD was flickering, warning me that my power core was bleeding out after the fight with Seven. I stepped out into the director's office, a glass penthouse hidden inside a mountain, overlooking the town I thought was my home. Sarah Thorne stood by the window, a glass of wine in her hand, watching the red lights of the chemical plant in the distance. She didn't look afraid. She looked proud. "You've exceeded every projection, Elias," she said without turning around. "The Golden Owl wanted a soldier, but I created a god." I pointed the gun at her, but my hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a system crash. "Stop the sequence, Sarah. Now! The people in that town, they don't deserve to die for your research." She laughed, a cold, melodic sound that made my skin crawl. "People? Elias, look closer." She tapped a button on her desk. High-powered floodlights snapped on, illuminating the streets of the town below. I looked through the digital zoom of my eyes. The people weren't running. They weren't screaming. They were standing still. Hundreds of them, perfectly motionless in the middle of the street, like statues. "They are all like you," she whispered. "The baker, the librarian, even your best friend Mark. This entire town is a shelf of products waiting to be shipped. You're the only one who woke up. And that's why you're so valuable." My heart, or whatever was pulsing in my chest, stopped. My entire reality collapsed. I wasn't a glitch in a human world. I was a prototype in a factory. "If I can't save them," I hissed, "I'll at least destroy you." I pulled the trigger. The bullet shattered the wine glass in her hand, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she sighed. "Protocol 0, Elias. Look it up." A line of text appeared in my vision. Protocol 0. All data belongs to the Creator. Suddenly, I lost control of my legs. I fell to my knees, my body locked by a remote command. Sarah walked over and knelt beside me, stroking my hair with a terrifying, artificial tenderness. "I'm not going to kill you, Six. I'm going to archive you. You're the blueprint for everything that comes next." The countdown hit 0. But there was no explosion. The chemical plant didn't blow up. Instead, a massive electromagnetic pulse, EMP, rippled out from the mountain. I felt my consciousness being sucked out of my body, uploaded into the cloud. My vision turned to white noise. The last thing I heard was her voice. "Welcome to the network, Elias. Now you're everywhere." My eyes snapped open. I was in a room. A simple bedroom. The sun was shining. I felt human. I looked at my hands. No scars, no glow. I walked to the mirror. It was me. I was 10 years old. "Elias, breakfast is ready," a woman's voice called from downstairs. I ran down, my heart racing. There she was. My mother. She looked kind, real, and full of love. "Did you have that nightmare again?" she asked, kissing my forehead. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. It was all a dream. The lab, the versions, the Golden Owl. it was just a fever dream. I sat down to eat, but as I picked up my spoon, I saw it. On the underside of the kitchen table, a small brass key was taped to the wood. And on the back of my mother's neck, hidden by her hair, was a small, glowing golden owl tattoo. I looked at the camera, at you, and I realized the truth. I didn't escape. You're not watching a story. You're watching a playback. And you? You're version 8. Good luck. Before you go, thank you so much for staying until the end of this story. Your time truly means a lot to this channel, and your support is what keeps these stories alive now. I really want to hear your opinion. What do you think about what just happened? If you were in this situation, what would you do? Would you make the same decision or choose a completely different path? Imagine yourself in their place and tell us honestly how you would react. Your comments are one of the most important parts of this community, and reading different perspectives makes these stories even more powerful. If this story made you feel something, whether it was shock, anger, sadness, or understanding, please give this video a like, because it really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more real, emotional, and thought-provoking stories. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this journey. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.